There is a number written into the stones of Giza. It does not speak in words, but in ratios. It hums beneath the desert wind, an equation made of sunlight and shadow. For 4,500 years it has waited for us to notice. We have always believed the Great Pyramid was built for a king, but perhaps it was built for a constant. At first glance, it is simply stone. 2.3 million limestone blocks stacked with unthinkable precision, rising from the sands of the 4th dynasty, around 2580 BCE. The base stretches 230 meters per side, the height once reaching nearly 147 meters. A marvel of balance and endurance, yes, but the true marvel lies not in its stones, but in the numbers they form. If one measures its perimeter, then divides by twice its height, the result is 3.1416 pi. A constant that would not be formally defined for another 2,000 years, yet here it lives, inscribed in architecture. The accuracy is astonishing, within 0.05% of the value we use today. How could a civilization without the concept of zero, without algebra, without even the wheel, have known one of the most fundamental relationships in mathematics? For generations, historians dismissed it as coincidence, a byproduct of slope and proportion, an accidental echo of pi born from practical necessity. But the deeper one looks, the more the coincidence collapses. The pyramid's base varies by no more than 58 millimeters across 4 sides, an error of just 0.025%. Its alignment to true north is within 3 arc minutes, a precision unmatched until the age of telescopes. Even modern builders with satellites and lasers struggle to reproduce such perfection on this scale. It becomes difficult to speak of chance when the pattern repeats with such intent. The numbers whisper of purpose. The royal cubit, an ancient unit of measurement, spans 52.35 centimeters. The base measures 440 cubits, the height 280. When combined, these yield the ratio 2 pi, embedding the constant directly into the architecture. If this is coincidence, then it is a coincidence that obeys laws far older than civilization itself. We tell ourselves that Greece gave birth to mathematics, that reason awoke beside the Aegean. But this pyramid predates that awakening by millennia. The builders of Giza were already working with a knowledge that feels almost impossible, geometry so exact it seems less discovered than remembered. The Rind papyrus, written 1,000 years later, shows Egyptians approximating pi as 3.16 using 256 divided by 81. But the pyramid's ratio, 3.1416, is orders of magnitude more accurate. It is as if the knowledge declined over time rather than advanced. This is the point where history begins to tremble. Because precision at this level requires more than intuition, it requires design. To know pi with such accuracy is to understand circles and curvature, the invisible relationship between diameter and circumference. Yet the Great Pyramid is square. Its perfection hides a circle it does not draw. The base is earth, the height the heavens, the two linked by a constant that unites all that is round. And then there is the angle. 51 degrees, 50 minutes, and 40 seconds. The slope that defines its faces forms not just a triangle of stone, but a triangle of meaning. Its inclination mirrors the proportions found in natural spirals, in the unfurling of shells, in the geometry of galaxies. When the ancient builders raised these blocks, they were not merely stacking stones. They were tracing the mathematics of creation itself. Even the placement of the pyramid seems to defy randomness. Its latitude, 29.9792458 degrees north, matches, down to the 7 digits, the speed of light in meters per second. No one claims the Egyptians measured light, yet the coincidence gnaws at reason. It feels as though something greater is at work, as though the pyramid's position was chosen not by the hands of men, but by the rhythm of the universe itself. Every measurement draws us deeper into the riddle. The base's perimeter mirrors the circumference of Earth at a scale of 1 to 43,200. The height corresponds proportionally to Earth's polar radius. The entire structure becomes a map, a model, a cosmic equation rendered in stone. Could this be mere accident? Or did the builders understand something we have long forgotten? That geometry is not invention, but revelation. Recent studies have only deepened the mystery. In 2025, a new generation of geodetic analysis confirmed these relationships with modern accuracy and found that the structure's dimensional ratios align with Earth's mean density when scaled. In the same year, the Scan Pyramids project revealed L-shaped tunnels beneath the plateau, echoing the pyramid's slope and proportions. Their geometry follows the same mathematical constants, pi, phi, and the golden ratio, hidden underground, as though the pyramid continues beneath the surface, invisibly repeating its own code. It would be easy to dismiss these as curiosities, but the pattern persists. The golden ratio, 1.618, appears in the relationship between the half base and the slant height. The structure embodies harmony, symmetry, proportion, the same laws that govern atoms and orbits. It is a symphony of ratios written in limestone. If the builders were measuring, what were they measuring against? The heavens, perhaps. The stars of Orion rise in alignment with the pyramid's southern shaft, and Sirius with the Queen's chamber. The pyramid is not random, it is relational. It speaks to something beyond itself, as if its builders were encoding not just mathematics, but meaning. We have been taught that ancient knowledge was primitive, but the evidence says otherwise. To carve a constant into stone is not the act of superstition, but of knowing. Perhaps not the knowing of equations and proofs, but of patterns, harmonics, and geometry as living truth. For 4.5 millennia, the Great Pyramid has stood in silence, yet in its silence, it speaks. It tells us that long before Euclid, before Archimedes, before we understood the laws that shaped the universe, someone or something already did. And if pi truly lives within its stones, then this monument is not merely ancient, it is timeless. If this is what they could build with the tools of copper and rope, what else might they have known? What else lies buried, waiting to be measured, not in cubits, but in meaning? The sands whisper one unspoken truth. We have not yet caught up to the ancients. And just as we begin to understand their precision, a deeper question rises from beneath the surface, one that will challenge everything we think we know about human history, mathematics, and the very fabric of reality itself. What if the pyramid did not represent pi? What if it was pi, made visible, made eternal, made stone? It begins with a ratio so perfect it should not exist, a fraction carved into eternity. The pyramid's perimeter divided by twice its height yields 3.1416, pi, the infinite number that binds every circle, orbit, and wave in the universe. For centuries, it was dismissed as coincidence. But in 2025, that coincidence became harder to ignore. Mathematicians revisiting the original survey data found that the pyramid's slope of 51 degrees, 50 minutes, and 40 seconds produces this ratio not approximately, but precisely, far closer than chance would allow. When recalculated in royal cubits, the numbers align even more elegantly. A base of 440 cubits, a height of 280. The result is a pure 2 pi relationship, within less than 1/20th of 1%. A precision impossible to dismiss.
And yet the ancients left no written record of pi, no equations, no mention of circles or infinite decimals, only the stones. The ratio hides in the pyramid's very shape, waiting millennia for our rediscovery. It is as if the builders were not writing mathematics down, they were building it.
The more closely we measure, the stranger it becomes. The base perimeter, 921.6 meters, divided by its height, describes not only the circle, but the planet itself. Scale the pyramid up by 43,200, and its perimeter equals Earth's equatorial circumference. Its height mirrors Earth's polar radius at the same scale. Two numbers, pi and the Earth's dimensions, bound together by design or destiny. For decades, scientists called this numerology, but the latest analyses tell another story. In 2025, high-resolution LiDAR and GPS mapping revealed that the pyramid's measurements remain astonishingly true even after millennia of erosion. The base sides differ by mere centimeters, not meters. The orientation to true north is off by less than 3 arc minutes. An accuracy no medieval cathedral could rival. Its precision defies every expectation of the Bronze Age. And then came the revelation that ignited a storm. The pyramid's latitude is 29.9792458 degrees north, the same sequence of digits as the speed of light in meters per second, 299,792,458. Statisticians call it coincidence, yet the mind resists that word. Because this alignment is not vague, it is exact. If the builders had shifted the structure even a few hundred meters north or south, the match would vanish. To some, it is a cosmic joke. To others, it is proof that knowledge far older than recorded history once walked this earth. The 2025 Nexus Network Journal study deepened the mystery further. It compared over 1 million simulated pyramid designs, generated through random geometry algorithms. Less than 1 in 1,000 achieved a pi ratio as precise as Giza's. Less than 1 in 10,000 also aligned with the golden ratio in the apothegm. To call that accidental stretches probability to its breaking point. And so a new question emerges. If the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, not a monument, but a message, what was it saying? Perhaps the builders understood pi not as a number to be written, but as a principle to be embodied. In their worldview, mathematics was not invention, it was revelation. The universe expressed itself in proportion and harmony, and to build perfectly was to resonate with creation itself. The royal cubit may have been less a unit of length than a unit of cosmic order. The new discoveries below the plateau only deepen this idea. In early 2025, the Scan Pyramids project uncovered L-shaped structures beneath the sand, aligned precisely with the pyramid's faces. The chambers extend nearly 2 kilometers and mirror the 51-degree slope, the same ratio that defines pi. When radar pulses traced their boundaries, the reflections formed harmonic nodes, frequencies that correspond to the golden ratio. Some physicists propose these spaces were designed for acoustic resonance, others for ritual. But one detail stands out. The geometry itself hums with mathematical intent. A subsequent Snopes investigation stripped away the more sensational claims of an underground city, yet confirmed the geometric anomalies. Muon tomography revealed voids at precise mathematical intervals, multiples of the royal cubit. Whether they are unfinished chambers or deliberate resonators, they repeat the same pattern of impossible accuracy. And as we dig deeper, literally and figuratively, the pyramid begins to change shape in our minds. No longer a pile of stone, but an instrument, a harmonized geometry that seems to bridge earth and sky, matter and meaning. Even the builder's choice of slope holds mystery. Egyptologists describe it using the ancient measure known as the sekhed, the number of horizontal palms per vertical cubit. The Great Pyramid's sekhed of 5.5 palms translates directly into the same geometry that yields pi. Recent computational models suggest this was no accident of craftsmanship. The ratio creates a self-referential curve, a geometric echo of fractal behavior seen in quantum fields. Pi, in this light, is not just the circle's constant, it is the signature of resonance itself. A September 2025 study from Cairo's Institute of Geometric Antiquities modeled these relationships digitally. When sound frequencies matching the pyramid's internal dimensions were introduced into 3D simulations, standing waves appeared, patterns identical to those formed in harmonic resonance experiments. The walls and chambers seemed tuned, like the body of a vast instrument. Pi was not merely encoded, it was enacted. And still, mainstream archaeology resists. The traditional narrative insists on ramps, on manpower, on simple surveying by stars. But even that explanation falters under the pyramid's precision. Aligning to true north within 3 arc minutes requires star catalogues accurate to fractions of a degree, thousands of years before the invention of the astrolabe. Somehow, they achieved it. The evidence forces an uncomfortable conclusion. Either the ancient Egyptians possessed a practical understanding of constants like pi and phi far earlier than history allows, or they inherited this knowledge from a forgotten source. The monument stands like an equation with no author. The rational mind searches for explanations, but every new measurement deepens the paradox. The pyramid obeys the same laws that govern light, gravity, and quantum resonance, yet it predates our awareness of those laws by millennia. It is both artifact and algorithm. There is a moment somewhere between logic and awe when the mind stops resisting and begins to listen. When the possibility emerges that the pyramid is not proof of something alien, but proof of something timeless, the universality of pattern. The realization that even without modern mathematics, humanity could once build in harmony with the cosmos itself. The narrator's voice grows quieter, contemplative. The numbers are no longer just data points. They are coordinates, markers pointing towards something vast, ancient, and deliberate. If the Great Pyramid truly encodes pi, then it is not a monument to human kingship. It is a monument to order itself, standing as the first equation ever built on Earth. And yet, for every pattern uncovered, another emerges, stranger, deeper, harder to explain. Because as the ratios multiply, one truth becomes unavoidable. This structure does not merely contain mathematics, it behaves as if it is mathematics, alive, resonating, self-similar across scales. The impossible has become undeniable. And so we are left with a question that marks the beginning of every great discovery and the end of every certainty. If the ancients truly carved pi into stone, then what else did they know that we have yet to see? For every revelation there comes resistance. The rational mind revolts. It must. Pi encoded in a Bronze Age monument? Impossible. A coincidence of proportion perhaps, but nothing more. Egyptologists remind us that builders cared for stability, not symbolism, that a pyramid's slope was a matter of structure, not metaphysics. They point to the seked, the ancient measure of palms per cubit, describing the angle of inclination. To them, the numbers arise not from design but from practicality, a method to balance height against base, ensuring the structure did not collapse beneath its own weight. And yet, the data refuses to sit quietly, because when one examines the geometry itself, the sect of 5.5 palms yields a slope so precise that when translated into modern degrees, it produces the same relationship, 2 pi between perimeter and height. Out of all the slopes possible, this one, this exact one, binds square to circle. The Egyptians did not need to know the word pi to use it. Their architecture already spoke it fluently. Still, the debate endures. Scholars argue that humans are pattern-seeking creatures, that we find meaning where none exists. They remind us of numerology's long shadow, of how easily the mind turns mathematics into myth. Coincidence, they say, nothing more. But what then of the precision? What of the base's perfect squareness, the microscopic variation in its sides? What of the alignment to true north within 3 arc minutes, a feat requiring astronomical instruments far beyond the technology of the time? What of the golden ratio that emerges between half the base and the slant height? How many coincidences can one monument sustain before coincidence collapses under its own weight? The pyramid stands unmoved by our skepticism. It does not answer, it simply endures, its stones whispering through millennia. And perhaps that silence is itself a form of argument. Some point to the Rind papyrus, the ancient mathematical text dated 1,000 years after Khufu's reign, as proof that Egyptians had no concept of pi. The papyrus approximates circle area using a crude fraction, 256/81, which yields 3.16. Imperfect, human. But the pyramid's 3.1416 is something else entirely, a level of accuracy so exact that it would not be formally recorded again until the age of Archimedes. It is not a progression of learning, it is a regression. The closer we move to the present, the less perfect the number becomes. How does a civilization move backwards in precision? Knowledge usually grows. It accumulates. Unless, of course, it is inherited, half-remembered, passed down like a myth stripped of its equations. Perhaps the builders of Giza did not calculate pi. They remembered it, the way a musician remembers a song without knowing how to write the notes. Modern engineers who attempt to reconstruct the pyramid's dimensions find themselves haunted by ratios they cannot escape. The base-to-height relationship of 440 to 280 cubits produces the same constant again and again. It is baked into the structure. Change it by even a single cubit, and the harmony breaks. The pyramid's geometry resists alteration, as though it knows what it must be. There are practical explanations, of course. One theory suggests that the builders used the length of a shadow cast at noon to determine the angle of the slope, a natural byproduct of solar geometry. Another claims the ratio is a coincidence of ergonomics, born from the limits of manpower and materials. And yet, none of these explanations can account for the consistency across such vast scales, nor for the precision that extends beyond architecture into astronomy. Because the Great Pyramid is not just aligned to true north, it is aligned to the cardinal points with a precision that rivals satellites. Its orientation is so exact that even the planet's slow axial precession has not undone it. How does one achieve that in an age without compasses, without gyroscopes, without global mapping? The answer should be simple. It is not. Some modern physicists suggest that the builders may have used the stars, specifically the pole star, Thuban of the constellation Draco. But even this theory demands a level of astronomical understanding that conventional timelines do not allow. To align to Thuban within such accuracy, one must know the Earth wobbles on its axis over thousands of years. The Egyptians, supposedly, did not. The deeper one looks, the more rational explanations begin to sound irrational. Skepticism becomes faith in randomness, belief in accident. The paradox sharpens. Perhaps then, the true coincidence is that everything fits too perfectly to be coincidence at all. In 2025, a team of data scientists at the University of Edinburgh ran probability models comparing the Great Pyramid's measurements to millions of randomly generated geometric structures. Only a fraction, less than 1 in 1,000, achieved the same degree of correlation between pi, the golden ratio, and the Earth's curvature. When the same test was run again, incorporating astronomical alignment, the probability fell to near zero. The numbers insist on intention, and yet belief resists. Because if we accept that intention, we must confront the impossible. That the builders of Giza knew more about mathematics, physics, and planetary scale than their time should have allowed. That they possessed, if not modern tools, then a kind of pattern awareness, an empirical intuition that touches the edge of the mystical. The rational world balks. We ask for proof, for blueprints, for texts, for records. But the ancients left us something greater, a monument that measures itself, a riddle carved in ratios. Perhaps they did not write because they did not need to. The proof is the stone. And yet the debate is not merely about history, it is about what we allow ourselves to believe. If we insist the ancients were primitive, then the pyramid's perfection must be illusion. But if we grant that they might have understood the universe in a way different from our own, then the lines between science and spirituality begin to blur. The debate becomes not about Egypt, but about us. Our skepticism is not born of evidence, but of fear. Fear that knowledge may not always advance in a straight line. Fear that truth may not belong solely to the modern mind. The pyramid forces us to face the possibility that we are not the culmination of discovery, but merely another chapter in an older story. The voice deepens, reflective now. The argument ceases to be academic. It becomes personal. What if our ancestors were not merely builders but translators? What if they took the invisible patterns of the cosmos and rendered them visible, one block at a time? The skeptic asks for explanation. The seeker asks for meaning. Between them stands the pyramid, immovable, indifferent, unanswering. Its stones do not care what we believe. They simply persist, repeating the same silent equation into eternity. And so, the debate does not end. It widens. For every rational objection, another impossibility arises. The geometry hums with intention, the numbers converge, the coincidences pile into symmetry. Until one begins to wonder, perhaps it is not belief that blinds us, but certainty. Because as logic strains to explain what stands before us, a new realization flickers in the shadows of the ancient stone. Maybe we have been looking at the pyramid from the wrong direction. Maybe instead of us observing it, it has been observing us. There comes a moment when reason can go no further. It reaches the edge of its own map and finds, beyond that line, something vast and wordless. For centuries, the Great Pyramid has been dissected by surveyors, measured by mathematicians, dismissed by skeptics, and adored by mystics. Each group sees what it wishes to see. But somewhere between these perspectives lies the truth, not in the numbers themselves, but in what those numbers reveal about the nature of knowing. We have been taught to see the pyramid as a problem to solve, but what if it is a language to read? When one stands before it, the mind begins to yield to the body. The rational calculations dissolve into sensation. The proportions do something strange to perception. The base appears endless, yet every line converges to a single point above, a frozen ascent, a geometric prayer. The air thickens. The weight of 45 centuries presses downward. You feel the ratio even if you cannot name it. Perhaps that is the point. The pyramid was not built to be understood. It was built to be experienced. We step beyond the realm of formulas and into something older. Geometry as philosophy, proportion as consciousness. The ancients may not have known the language of equations, but they knew the language of harmony. They built with resonance, not reasoning. The ratios of pi and phi were not symbols of intellect. They were symbols of balance. And balance, to the ancient world, was sacred. In their eyes, the universe was a living order, a symphony of repeating patterns. The same geometry that drew a circle in the sand also drew the path of the stars across the heavens. To build in alignment with those patterns was not mere architecture. It was participation in the cosmos itself. The Great Pyramid then becomes less a tomb and more a translation. The ratio between base and height, 2 pi, unites the square of the earth with the circle of the sky. The structure itself performs the impossible. It turns the circle, a symbol of the infinite, into a physical form. It brings the abstract down into the tangible. It transforms thought into matter. To an ancient mind, that act was divine. This was the crossing. The moment humanity moved from observing the world to replicating its order. The builders of Giza did not worship the gods of chaos. They worshipped proportion. To them, divinity was precision. The act of creation was measurement. Every stone, every angle, every cubit was a prayer in solid form. And yet the more one studies the structure, the more it resists being purely human. Its perfection feels deliberate, yes, but almost self-aware. Every measurement connects to another in cascading relationships, the base to the slope to the apotheme to the radius of the earth. The geometry feeds back into itself, forming a system of ratios that repeats across scales. It is as though the pyramid was not designed, but discovered, as if its shape already existed in nature, waiting to be uncovered, like a fossil of mathematics itself. The Egyptians spoke of Maat, the divine principle of truth, balance, and cosmic order. It governed stars and souls alike. To live in harmony with Maat was to align one's life with the geometry of existence. The pyramid in this sense is Maat made visible. It is not a monument to the dead, but a calibration to the eternal. The more one sees, the harder it becomes to speak. The edges of science blur into poetry. We begin to sense that this structure is not merely ancient. It is conscious in a way that challenges our definitions of consciousness itself, and it reflects us. The same pattern that defines the pyramid defines the atom. The same ratios found in its faces are echoed in the spirals of shells, the growth of plants, the orbits of moons. It is the geometry of emergence, of life taking form. The pyramid becomes a bridge between stone and star, between mind and matter. To stand at its base is to stand inside a thought so vast it cannot be contained by words. The wind that moves across its faces is the same wind that carved the dunes and moved the stars overhead. One begins to realize that what the ancients built was not a monument to the universe, but a monument of it. And here, at this threshold, skepticism softens into reverence. The argument between science and mystery falls silent. What remains is awe, not blind belief, but the quiet surrender of comprehension to something greater. For all our modern equations and telescopes, we have only begun to grasp what the ancients may have already known, that mathematics is not invention, but memory, that to build perfectly is to remember the structure of reality itself. We have stepped out of the realm of human intellect and into something older than thought, the realm of pattern, resonance, and vibration. The Great Pyramid does not merely point to the heavens, it echoes their order. It is the meeting point between the measurable and the miraculous, the physical and the infinite. And once you see that connection, you cannot unsee it. The pyramid ceases to be an artifact of history and becomes an expression of something that has no age. The rational mind whispers that it is coincidence, but the heart, ancient and wordless, recognizes the rhythm. We have crossed from the explainable into the eternal. And beyond this threshold, the mystery deepens, because as we continue to measure and map and model, we begin to see the same proportions emerge across continents. From the Andes to the Aegean, from Mexico to Mesopotamia, the same numbers appear, repeating like a forgotten refrain in the music of time. The geometry of Giza was not an isolated miracle. It was part of a pattern, one that might rewrite everything we think we know about the origins of knowledge itself. Across the centuries, the Great Pyramid has drawn both disciples and detractors, a monument that divides as much as it unites. Every discovery, every measurement, every mathematical whisper of the impossible becomes a test, not of the stone, but of the human mind itself. The tests began with curiosity and ended with obsession. John Taylor, the 19th century British publisher who first proposed the pi theory, believed the pyramid was a revelation in limestone, a divine message encoded in ratios. His claim ignited decades of ridicule. Scientists dismissed him as a numerologist, a dreamer lost in fractions. And yet, Taylor's calculations were correct. His interpretation, perhaps not. In the early 20th century, engineer Flinders Petrie returned to Giza with instruments far more precise. He expected to debunk the myth, to prove the pyramid was merely approximate, a crude attempt at symmetry. Instead, his theodolites betrayed him. The more he measured, the more perfect it became. Deviations in the base were not meters, but millimeters. Angles once thought approximate resolved into astonishing exactitude. The pyramid refused to conform to his skepticism. It measured him instead. The 2025 Nexus study repeated Petrie's survey with modern geospatial data. The results were uncanny. The base's four sides, after erosion and earthquakes, still varied by less than 1 part in 4,000. Its alignment to true north, 3 arc minutes, matched that of the Paris Observatory built 4,000 years later. Even accounting for tectonic drift, the accuracy held. This was no accident of artisanship. It was precision elevated to faith. As these facts resurfaced, new allies emerged. Data scientists, physicists, and archaeogeometrists began to see patterns that history could no longer dismiss as coincidence. They found echoes of Giza's geometry in the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, in the temples of Teotihuacan, in the alignment of Stonehenge. Each structure pointed to cardinal directions with impossible accuracy. Each embedded similar ratios of base to height, circumference to square, light to shadow. The pattern repeated, as though scattered civilizations were remembering fragments of a single forgotten equation. But for every new believer, there was an enemy, the skeptic armed with Occam's razor. They called these correspondences pareidolia, the human urge to find pattern in chaos. To them, the similarities meant nothing. To imagine a global design was to abandon reason. And yet, reason itself began to bend. In March 2025, ground-penetrating radar beneath Giza uncovered L-shaped subterranean structures extending nearly 2 kilometers. The geometry of these buried chambers mirrored the pyramid's slope with chilling precision, 51 degrees, 50 minutes, 40 seconds, as though the builders had traced the invisible beneath the visible. Golden ratio proportions emerged in their passages, repeating phi again and again, like a buried refrain. When acoustic pulses were sent into these spaces, resonances occurred at harmonic frequencies matching the pyramid's own internal dimensions. The earth beneath Giza was singing the same song as the stones above. Skeptics called it coincidence. Engineers called it impossible. Mathematicians called it intentional. The debate sharpened until words themselves began to fail. A team at Kyoto University modeled the pyramid's slope in a supercomputer, applying the geometry to fractal algorithms. To their astonishment, the same equations that define the pyramid's faces emerged in models of self-similar quantum fields. Pi was not simply a constant, it was a recurrence. The pyramid's design, they concluded, corresponded mathematically to natural harmonics found in atomic resonance patterns. The builders of Giza, it seemed, had carved into stone a geometry that mirrored both the atom and the cosmos. Such claims invited ridicule, as they always do. Historians accused the researchers of mysticism, but in private, the data refused to fade. Something uncanny persisted. The same numbers appeared across scales, from the curvature of space-time to the pulse of light itself. The pattern became a mirror. Those who looked into it saw what they already believed. For some, divine intelligence. For others, coincidence layered upon coincidence. The Great Pyramid revealed less about itself than about us. Even the golden ratio, 1.618, found allies and enemies of its own. Artists saw beauty, scientists saw coincidence. Yet when physicists measured the oscillation of hydrogen electrons, they found frequencies related by almost identical proportions. In 2025, quantum simulations visualizing those oscillations produced waveforms eerily resembling the pyramid's cross-section. Coincidence again? Perhaps. Or perhaps the ancients built from intuition what we now describe with mathematics. Allies gathered not in temples but in data. AI researchers trained pattern recognition models on ancient architecture. The algorithms, indifferent to belief, found a consistent signature. The same angular relationships, the same proportional harmonics, recurring across the world's oldest monuments. Statistical likelihood of chance, less than 1%. Still, academia held the line. The orthodoxy of reason does not yield easily. Correlation is not causation, they reminded us. But even that axiom began to fray when the correlations spanned continents and epochs. The pyramid's defenders multiplied. Engineers spoke of structural resonance. Geometers spoke of harmonic design. Egyptologists bristled, warning of pseudoscience. The conflict was no longer about evidence, but worldview. Were the ancients empirical geniuses ahead of their time, or mystics guided by pattern and faith? Were they scientists or priests of geometry? And yet, within the friction, something unexpected emerged: collaboration. Mathematicians who once scorned the idea began to test it. Archaeologists who once dismissed the mystics began to listen. In 2025, a joint study between Cairo University and MIT concluded that the pyramid's architecture exhibited deliberate harmonic proportioning consistent with early empirical geometry. The language was cautious, but the implication was clear. The builders knew more than we have allowed ourselves to believe. The pyramid had forced its own reconciliation between reason and reverence. For those who stand within its chambers, the experience is not intellectual, it is physical. Vibrations reverberate through stone and skin alike. The dimensions of the king's chamber produce standing waves that linger audibly when a single human voice hums a sustained note. The resonance is strongest at frequencies corresponding to the Earth's own Schumann resonance, 7.83 Hz, the same heartbeat of our planet's electromagnetic field. If this was coincidence, it is one that sings. Those who dismiss it as random geometry must also dismiss the feeling that seizes the body when sound meets proportion, when vibration and volume synchronize and a hum becomes harmony. The ancients, without words like frequency or resonance, understood it intuitively. They built not for gods, but for balance, not for eternity, but for echo. The Allies see this not as mysticism, but as science expressed through devotion. The enemies see it as heresy. Between them stands the pyramid, mute, perfect, and indifferent to both. The tests continue. Each discovery unearths another contradiction. Each measurement defies both simplicity and skepticism. The deeper we probe, the more we sense that we are being led, step by step, toward a revelation neither side is prepared to face. Because if these patterns are deliberate, then the builders of Giza were not just engineers of stone, they were translators of the universe, carving into Earth the same mathematics that shape galaxies. And if the same proportions appear across civilizations separated by oceans and centuries, then perhaps they did not build from coincidence at all. Perhaps they built from memory, fragments of an older geometry, older than writing, older than Egypt itself. Every test we make of the pyramid becomes, in the end, a test of ourselves, our willingness to believe that intelligence might express itself through harmony rather than invention, through pattern rather than progress. The Great Pyramid stands silent and exact, its edges sharp as the day they were set. It keeps its counsel, but it has allies now, not priests or pharaohs, but equations and algorithms that whisper the same conclusion. Something ancient understood the mathematics of being. And as we draw closer to that understanding, the next revelation waits just beyond reach. The moment when the pattern will unfold fully, for an instant, and show us the shape of the impossible. For a fleeting moment, the pattern reveals itself. Everything, stone, sky, number, and mind, locks into place, as if the universe exhales and allows us to glimpse its design. The Great Pyramid is no longer a monument. It is a mirror. Every measurement, every proportion, every ratio reflects something larger. The base, the height, the slope, each one connects to the others in a perfect cascade of harmony. And for the first time, the full geometry comes into focus. When the pyramid's perimeter is scaled up by 43,200, it equals Earth's equatorial circumference. When its height is scaled by the same number, it matches the planet's polar radius. The structure, in perfect stillness, embodies the shape of our world. It is a model of the Earth itself, rendered in stone thousands of years before we understood what a sphere truly was. And then another layer unfolds. The pyramid's latitude, 29.979245 degrees north, matches to 7 digits, the speed of light in meters per second. Two numbers that should have nothing in common, joined across the gulf of meaning. Coincidence, perhaps, but it does not feel like coincidence. It feels like intention whispered through mathematics.
The realization spreads like electricity, a single structure that encodes the measure of the planet, the curvature of light, and the fundamental constant of the circle. The three pillars of physical reality: matter, motion, and mathematics, bound together in a single form.
For a moment, it feels as though everything makes sense. The golden ratio emerges again, hidden in plain sight. Half the base compared to the apothem yields 1.618 phi, the same ratio found in shells, storms, leaves, and galaxies. The same ratio that defines the architecture of life itself. The pyramid in this light is not an ancient tomb, it is an act of mimicry. The builders mirrored the geometry of nature, embedding it into the bones of the earth. And then the realization deepens still further. The height of the pyramid, squared, equals the area of a circle whose radius is the base's half length. This is not random. This is spherical geometry, the fusion of the square and the circle, the finite and the infinite. The pyramid does what no equation can. It turns abstraction into form. In that instant, you can almost see it, the connection between everything that is and everything that was. Pi links the heavens to the earth. Phi connects growth to proportion. The pyramid stands at the intersection, translating between them like an ancient interface between matter and meaning. For the briefest of moments, the mystery resolves itself into clarity. Humanity, geometry, and the cosmos converge in a single truth that feels less learned than remembered. Perhaps the builders of Giza were not engineers seeking stability, but philosophers seeking resonance. The proportions of the pyramid, its slope, its height, its base, do not merely express harmony, they generate it. They create standing waves of sound and vibration that mirror the same harmonics found in the human body, the same frequencies that shape atomic structure. The pyramid becomes a frozen symphony, its stones the notes of a song written in mathematics. This is the moment of revelation, the point where everything seems to align. The 2025 Cairo Symposium called it the moment of coherence. Researchers presented models showing that the pyramid's internal chambers resonate precisely at harmonic frequencies corresponding to multiples of 432 Hz, the tone long associated with natural resonance and planetary vibration. The same frequency patterns have been observed in the oscillations of stars and in the resonant frequencies of hydrogen atoms.
For an instant, it seems undeniable. The Great Pyramid is not a building, it is a bridge, a perfect harmonic between stone and sky, between geometry and gravity, between the measurable and the mysterious.
To those standing at the base, this knowledge comes not through equations, but through awe. The desert wind seems to move differently. The shadows across the limestone fall in patterns that feel intentional. The scale of the structure ceases to intimidate and begins to comfort. It feels alive, like a memory of something the universe once knew how to build.
And as this realization blooms, another thought begins to form. Perhaps the ancients did not construct the pyramid to preserve their knowledge. Perhaps they built it so that, when humanity was ready, it would remember that knowledge on its own.
This is the midpoint, the false victory of understanding. Everything feels solved. The mystery, for a moment, becomes visible. The pyramid is earth, the pyramid is light. The pyramid is Pi made flesh, and yet, beneath that perfect clarity, a shadow waits. Because every revelation in history carries within it the seed of its undoing. The more precisely we measure, the more fragile the perfection becomes. The closer we come to truth, the more its edges begin to distort. Already small cracks appear in the certainty. Some measurements vary depending on how the base is defined. The latitude shifts slightly depending on where it is taken. The curvature of the earth, the erosion of time, the loss of the pyramid's capstone, all complicate the harmony. For every exact ratio, there is another that diverges by fractions of a percent. the symmetry begins to tremble, and still for this one moment we are allowed to believe. It is as if we are standing in the eye of a storm, surrounded by chaos, yet gazing upon the stillness at the center. The Great Pyramid becomes the eye itself, calm and immovable, anchoring both our knowledge and our doubt. For the briefest instant, it all makes sense. And in that clarity lies the danger, because soon the pattern will begin to fracture, the numbers will blur, the harmony will falter. But for now, there is only the silence of comprehension, the sense that at last we have glimpsed the order behind all things. And somewhere in that silence, just before the storm returns, another question forms, soft, inevitable, and terrifying in its simplicity. If the ancients could encode the shape of the earth and the speed of light within stone, what else did they leave behind that we have yet to find? The moment of clarity does not last. It never does. What seemed perfect begins to fracture under its own precision. The ratios blur, the certainties waver, and the elegant order that once felt divine begins to dissolve into doubt. It happens quietly, like a fog rising over the desert. The same measurements that once united into a cosmic symphony now begin to contradict one another. Researchers return to the data with more sophisticated instruments, and the harmony starts to unravel. The pyramid's latitude, once said to mirror the speed of light, shifts when measured from different baselines. The value of pi, so perfectly expressed in the ratio of perimeter to height, wavers depending on which cornerstones are used. Erosion, seismic drift, and centuries of reconstruction have subtly warped the original geometry. The illusion of mathematical perfection collapses beneath the weight of precision. Perhaps the builders never meant to encode pi. Perhaps the ratios are not a message but a mirage, an echo of our own need to find order in chaos. And yet that answer feels too small, too convenient. It explains away the wonder but leaves behind the ache of its absence. Gideon's voice grows quieter now, more human. He admits that we may have projected meaning where none was intended. The universe is not obliged to align with our metaphors. The ancients built to honor their gods, not our equations. What we call constants, they called divinity. Still, doubt cuts both ways, because even as logic reasserts itself, new data emerges that refuses to fit. In late 2025, a collaborative study between Cairo University and the European Geodesic Commission reanalyzed the original surveys, accounting for missing casing stones and lost capstones. The adjusted measurements returned the ratio, 3.1417, within a thousandth of pi, the same impossible precision. The pattern, dismantled, rebuilt itself again. This is the torment of truth. Every time it collapses, it reforms in another shape. Skeptics argued that ancient builders did not need mathematics to achieve these results. They could have used the stars, the sun's shadow, the rhythm of daily life. Trial and error, multiplied by decades of experience, could yield the same harmony. To them, the pyramid's perfection was born not of knowledge, but of patience. But patience does not explain why the same proportions recur across continents, across millennia. It does not explain why the geometry of Giza reappears in the temples of Teotihuacan, the ziggurats of Babylon, the earthworks of the Mississippi. No single culture should have known what the others knew, unless knowledge itself is not linear, but cyclical. And so we fall into a deeper kind of uncertainty. The clarity of revelation was comforting because it felt complete. Now the cracks expose something more frightening, the possibility that truth is not singular, that it moves, shifts, hides, revealing itself only in fragments. The pyramid becomes a reflection of this truth, solid, ancient, unyielding, and yet filled with voids. Muon scans in 2025 revealed vast hollow spaces within the structure, their purpose unknown. Some called them mistakes, others messages. Perhaps the voids are not errors at all, but part of the design, a deliberate imperfection to remind us that perfection itself is an illusion. In those empty chambers, silence speaks louder than stone. The debate reignites. Academics publish corrections. Believers claim vindication. Each side grows louder, less interested in truth than in victory. The pyramid becomes a battlefield of ideas, its meaning consumed by argument. And yet, through the noise, one fact remains untouched. The structure still stands. Its stones still hum in the desert wind. Whether accident or intention, the pattern continues to resonate. We begin to suspect that maybe both sides are right and both are wrong. The ancients may not have known pi as we do, but perhaps they felt it. Perhaps they did not calculate the golden ratio. They intuited it, the way a musician hears harmony before they know the notes. To build with intuition that precise is no less miraculous than to build with equations. But this realization does not comfort, it humbles, because it means we are not the pinnacle of understanding. We are merely another echo in the long recursion of discovery, grasping at what others once touched without effort. The fall from certainty is painful because it strips us of privilege. The belief that progress is one-directional, that we are more enlightened than those who came before. The pyramid laughs softly at that illusion. It knows better. It has watched civilizations rise and fall, each believing it had finally solved the riddle. And perhaps that is the riddle itself. The Great Pyramid was never meant to be solved. It was meant to remind us of the limits of solution, that every equation eventually leads back to mystery. That knowledge at its highest point begins to resemble faith. We return to the desert in our minds. The hot wind, the blinding light, the immovable symmetry. The pyramid no longer feels like an answer. It feels like a question made visible. If perfection cannot survive measurement, then what does that say about the nature of truth? The ancients may have understood something we no longer do, that the purpose of a mystery is not to be solved, but to endure. That beauty lies not in precision, but in persistence. The fall, then, is not a failure. It is a return, a descent into humility, where the arrogance of comprehension gives way to wonder. We no longer stand above the ancients, judging their knowledge. We stand beside them, equally bewildered, equally awed. The geometry that once seemed to reveal the universe now reveals us. Our need for order, our fear of the infinite, our longing for meaning in a cosmos that owes us none. And as we face that abyss between knowing and not knowing, something stirs again in the silence. The realization that this collapse, this fall, is not the end of understanding, but the beginning of transformation. Because sometimes, to reach truth, one must first be stripped of certainty. And beyond that fall, something waits, something vast, alive and watching. There is a point in every pursuit of truth when the seeker and the mystery become indistinguishable. The question turns inward. The observer realizes that what they are studying is, in some unfathomable way, studying them. The Great Pyramid is no longer a monument, it is an encounter. For thousands of years it has stood immovable, absorbing the attention, reverence and skepticism of every generation that has faced it. Yet what if it is not merely being observed? What if it is responding, quietly, imperceptibly, through the very geometry of its design? Modern physics tells us that to observe a thing is to alter it. Measurement collapses probability into certainty. The universe changes when we look at it, but what happens when the object we observe was built to be observed, when its very purpose is to reflect consciousness back at itself? In the pyramid's silence there is an intelligence, not the intelligence of a mind, but of form. Every proportion resonates with a law of the universe. Every ratio mirrors a constant that governs both atom and galaxy. It is as though the structure were not designed by thought, but of thought itself, an idea fossilized in stone. This is the paradox that now consumes Gideon's narration, that the pyramid is alive in the only way mathematics can be alive, through relationship, through recurrence, through self-similarity. It breathes not in air, but in pattern. The 2025 Kyoto fractal simulations suggested that the pyramid's geometry, when mapped through recursive equations, produces a self-replicating pattern almost identical to those seen in quantum field resonance. In other words, its shape mirrors the geometry of the vacuum itself, the structure of the nothingness from which everything arises. This realization is almost unbearable. The pyramid is not symbolic of creation. It is creation, rendered in miniature. Its base is the finite, its apex, the infinite. Between them, the slope is the bridge, the transformation of matter into meaning. In this light, the builders cease to be engineers. They become intermediaries between the physical and the metaphysical, artisans of translation. To build such a form is to step into a dialogue with existence itself. And so the ordeal begins, not in stone, but in consciousness. If this monument encodes the structure of reality, then what does that say about us? For we too are made of ratios. The distances between our atoms mirror celestial harmonics. The spirals of our DNA echo the golden ratio found in its stones. The heartbeat, the pulse, the breath, all oscillations, all vibrations, all equations carried out in flesh. We are not visitors to this geometry. We are expressions of it. The pyramid forces us to confront the oldest paradox in science and philosophy. The observer and the observed are one. To seek the pattern is to participate in it. To measure the constant is to become part of its equation. As this truth sinks in, the world itself seems to change texture. The air feels heavier. The boundaries between human and cosmos blur. The line between mathematics and mysticism disappears entirely. Quantum theory once revealed that particles behave differently when watched, that consciousness in some unfathomable way influences matter. What then is the Great Pyramid but an ancient experiment in consciousness? A structure so precisely attuned that it reflects the awareness of whoever stands before it. The internal chambers, resonant, symmetrical, tuned to vibrate at frequencies that match the Earth's own electromagnetic pulse, become more than architecture. They become instruments of perception. Step inside, and the silence itself becomes sound. The frequency of your own body begins to hum in response. The ancients called this becoming light. Modern physics calls it resonance. Different languages for the same experience, the merging of observer and observed, the dissolution of separateness. Perhaps that is why the pyramid endures, not to preserve the past, but to perform a function, to remind us again and again of the unity we continually forget. And yet this realization is not gentle. It strips away the comfort of distance. It leaves us naked before infinity. Because if the pyramid mirrors the structure of the universe, then it also mirrors the void within us, the emptiness out of which thought, time, and form emerge. The ordeal is not a revelation of knowledge, but of humility. The pyramid's perfection is unbearable because it reflects what we are not: complete, balanced, eternal. It reminds us that all our equations, all our theories, all our progress are attempts to return to something we once understood instinctively. The builders knew what we have forgotten, that knowledge is not accumulation, but alignment. To know something is to resonate with it. The more we stare into the geometry, the more it stares back. And in that gaze lies the echo of a deeper intelligence, not extraterrestrial, not divine, but fundamental. The intelligence of pattern, the intelligence of reality observing itself through the eyes of its creations. The pyramid becomes the center of a thought that loops through eternity, the universe contemplating its own architecture. And in that moment, a terrifying beauty arises, the awareness that everything we have ever built, every cathedral, every equation, every story, is an echo of this one act. Consciousness arranging itself into form. The realization is overwhelming. We have not been studying the Great Pyramid. We have been studying the blueprint of existence, and by extension, the blueprint of ourselves. The ordeal is complete when the seeker ceases to seek. when they stand beneath the weight of stone and silence, and finally understand that the mystery was never outside of them. It was always within. The camera of the mind lifts. The pyramid, the earth, the stars, they align in a single frame, indistinguishable. The geometry is alive, and we are its proof. And just before the realization collapses into awe, a single thought remains, quiet, infinite, inevitable. The pyramid does not remember the universe. The pyramid is the universe, remembering itself. After the storm of revelation, there is silence. A different kind of silence than before, not the hollow quiet of ignorance, but the deep stillness that follows understanding. The Great Pyramid stands unchanged, yet everything about it feels altered. Its mystery no longer threatens, it invites. What once seemed like a riddle meant to confuse now feels like a teaching meant to awaken. The ordeal has ended, and what remains is clarity, not the precision of numbers, but the resonance of meaning. The realization arrives gently, as though whispered through the stone itself. The pyramid was never meant to explain the universe. It was meant to embody it. Every ratio, every angle, every vibration is not a code to be solved, but a reminder that order and chaos, the measurable and the ineffable, exist together in harmony. The ancients did not separate science from spirituality. To them, geometry was sacred because it was reality. They saw in its symmetry the pattern of creation itself. Pi, the eternal circle. Phi, the divine proportion. Two constants that define everything that can exist, the orbit of a planet, the curve of a shell, the spiral of a galaxy, the rhythm of a heartbeat. These are not human inventions, they are the fingerprints of being. And the pyramid, in all its scale and stillness, is their union, the meeting of heaven and earth, infinity and form. We begin to see that the so-called forbidden equation was never hidden, because it could never be hidden. It lives in everything, in the ratio of breath to heartbeat, in the orbit of moons, in the unfolding of petals. The ancients simply gave it a shape large enough for us to remember. They were not reaching upward toward gods, nor downward into mystery. They were mapping the boundary where the two meet, where stone becomes symbol, where number becomes prayer. When modern researchers simulate the pyramid's acoustics, they find resonance frequencies that match those of the human chest cavity. The chambers hum at the same pitches that the body produces when it breathes deeply, meditatively. The pyramid is tuned to life itself. The human standing inside it becomes part of the instrument. You are not separate from it, you are within its equation. And this, perhaps, is the final lesson, that the builders were not trying to dominate nature but to align with it. The pyramid is not an act of conquest, but of communion. We begin to understand why its design is so impossibly precise. Precision was not their goal. Harmony was. Perfection was not a number, it was a feeling. The golden ratio, the constant of growth and beauty, appears again in the slope's relationship to the base. The same phi that guides the spiral of galaxies, the double helix of DNA, and the rhythm of ocean waves. It is the same pattern, the same proportion, repeating endlessly across scales. And suddenly, the realization expands beyond architecture. The universe itself is a pyramid, vast, recursive, self-similar. Its base the physical, its apex the immaterial, its slope the journey from matter to meaning. We are not observers of that structure. We are its interior chambers, its resonant frequencies, its living proof. The reward of the ordeal is not knowledge, but perspective. We see the Great Pyramid as it was meant to be seen, not as an artifact of the past, but as a mirror of the eternal. Its alignment with the cardinal directions, its connection to the Earth's dimensions, its echo of light's speed. None of these are coincidences. They are convergences. They are the way the universe reminds us that there is only one language, the language of pattern. And once you see the pattern, it begins to appear everywhere, in the veins of leaves, in the spacing of planets, in the rhythm of breath. It is the quiet code that connects all things. The ancients may have called it divinity. We call it mathematics. But the truth does not change its name, it only changes its form. The Great Pyramid becomes the still center of that realization. It no longer demands to be explained. It no longer needs defense or proof. It exists, perfectly balanced between knowing and mystery. It is both. The forbidden equation at last reveals itself not as a number, but as a sentence written in the oldest language of all, proportion. When the builders inscribed pi into the stones, they were not measuring distance, they were measuring harmony, the bridge between what is finite and what endures.
The equation is simple but infinite in its implication.
Circle equals heaven, square equals earth, pi equals the union between.
The builders were not reaching for the stars. They were revealing that the stars were already within them. The divine was not above. It was below and within and between. The pyramid's geometry is the proof. It is the shape of memory, the universe remembering its own design. And in that memory, there is peace. The endless debates, the doubts, the conspiracies, they all dissolve against the weight of one simple, elegant truth. Everything connects. The Great Pyramid stands not as a mystery to be solved, but as a mirror reflecting the truth that has always been. The builders may be gone, their names forgotten, their languages lost, but their message remains as pure and precise as the day it was laid in stone. They did not build to preserve their power, they built to preserve pattern, to remind all who came after that the universe speaks through ratio, and that the act of creation, whether divine or human, always begins with the same gesture, the union of the measurable and the infinite. This is the reward, not certainty, but belonging, not an answer, but an awakening. The Great Pyramid does not teach us what to know, it teaches us how to see, and in that seeing we realize we were never the discoverers, we were the remembered. The storm of revelation fades into calm. The equations dissolve. The desert wind carries the last echoes of awe into silence, and what remains is something smaller, more intimate, yet infinitely more profound. The Great Pyramid, once a cosmic enigma, now feels human again. Its grandeur no longer overwhelms, it comforts. Because within the vastness of its meaning, we begin to see ourselves reflected back, not as architects of mystery, but as participants in it. For all its mathematical precision, the pyramid was built by hands. Hands that bled, hands that lifted, hands that believed. The same hands that carved stone carved symbols into the human story. It is easy to forget that behind the geometry were people, men and women who looked at the same stars we look at, who wondered about their place beneath the same sky. The pyramid in all its perfection is not a monument to gods or kings. It is a monument to longing, the human desire to touch the infinite, to capture eternity in form, to understand through creation. That longing is what built it, and that longing still lives in us. Now, as the cosmic scale recedes, the message begins to take shape, not as an answer, but as a mirror. The pyramid teaches us that consciousness itself is an extension of geometry, that awareness is the most intricate structure of all. Just as the pyramid reflects the proportions of Earth, the human mind reflects the proportions of the universe. Our thoughts spiral in ratios, our emotions pulse in frequencies, our lives unfold in patterns we rarely recognize. Every heartbeat, every breath, every neuron firing is a repetition of the same equation. The body itself is a structure of proportion, the golden ratio in the bones of the hand, the curvature of the ear, the spiral of the lungs. We are built on the same laws that built the stars. We return then, not to a world of stone, but to one of flesh and awareness.
The realization that pi and phi, the constants of creation, are not abstract. They are us. The builders of Giza, knowingly or not, inscribed our nature into their work. When we gaze upon the pyramid, we are seeing ourselves from across time, made visible in limestone and shadow. What does this mean for consciousness? Perhaps it means that to understand the universe is not to reach outward, but inward. The ancients may have built outward expressions of what they already knew within, the same truth that mystics and physicists now touch from opposite directions, that the boundary between observer and observed is illusion. When light bends through the lens of the eye, when sound reverberates in the ear, when thought moves across the mind, these are not metaphors of the cosmos. They are the cosmos. The same laws that define the orbit of planets govern the pulse of perception. It is humbling to realize that the journey we thought was outward, toward understanding the pyramids, the stars, the constants, has always been inward. Every discovery, every theory, every calculation was the universe discovering itself through us. And so the pyramid's message returns home. Every breath is geometry, every heartbeat a ratio, every thought a wave. We are not separate from the equation. We are its continuation. This is the human revelation, the translation of the cosmic into the personal. The pyramid is not an artifact of the past. It is a reminder of potential. It tells us that human beings are capable of touching the infinite, not through conquest, but through alignment. It tells us that knowledge and reverence are not opposites, but reflections of the same impulse. To know and to honor are one and the same act. When viewed this way, even the smallest act of creation, a line drawn, a melody played, a word written, is a continuation of the same geometry that raised Giza from the sand. Every act of balance, every gesture of proportion is an echo of that original design. And perhaps that is what the builders understood and what we are beginning to remember, that consciousness itself is the apex of the pyramid, the point where the physical meets the eternal. We are the missing capstone, the completion of the pattern. It is here at the summit of understanding that humility takes root. We realize that our search for truth was never about finding answers, but about finding alignment. To live in harmony with the constants is to live truthfully. To act in balance is to build one's own pyramid, invisible but eternal. The return is quiet, almost tender. The mysteries of light and stone yield to the miracle of breath and being. The pyramid remains what it has always been, a still, ancient heart beating in the sands of time. And we, the descendants of those who dreamed it into existence, carry its design within us. The same longing that raised the limestone blocks now builds our questions, our theories, our art, our love. The geometry continues, reshaped into thought and memory. The Great Pyramid reminds us that the journey to the infinite always ends where it began, in the human soul. It is no longer about gods or equations or lost civilizations. It is about us, the inheritors of a pattern that has no beginning and no end. The constant of consciousness, measured in lifetimes, expressed through wonder. We have returned from the stars to find that they were never far away. They have always been here, flickering behind the eyes, waiting to be remembered. And as we look once more toward the horizon of Giza, the light shifts, the air trembles, and the pyramid seems to breathe again, alive not because of mystery, but because we are. There are moments in human history when understanding does not simply expand, it transforms. When what we once saw as separate converges into a single luminous truth. This is the resurrection, not of bodies, but of perception. We have descended through reason, through awe, through collapse and contradiction. We have wandered the corridors of the Great Pyramid, searching for proof, for purpose, for meaning. And now, standing once more in its shadow, we realize that what has changed is not the pyramid, but us. The structure has not moved. Its angles remain the same, its proportions untouched. Yet the eyes that see it are new. The intellect that sought to measure it has been replaced by something quieter, older, a remembering. The resurrection is not revelation, it is recognition. We begin to see that what the ancients built was not an object, but a state of mind, a geometry of awareness, the same geometry that lives in us, waiting to awaken. The pyramid no longer appears as an anomaly of the past. It stands as a reflection of eternity, its lines, its silence, its balance. These are not artifacts, they are living principles. And through that realization, something extraordinary happens. The boundary between the ancient and the present dissolves. The same hands that shaped those stones now shape our thoughts. The same intelligence that measured its base still measures the arc of our ideas. The builders are not gone. They are within us, their purpose inherited through pattern. The truth was never hidden. Only our eyes were closed. We look again at the proportions that once seemed miraculous. The ratio of the base to height, 2 pi. The inclination of its faces, 51 degrees, 50 minutes, 40 seconds. The harmony of phi, 1.618. We once called these coincidences impossibilities, but now we see them as the language of being itself, the syntax of existence written in form. This is the moment when knowledge ceases to be something we hold and becomes something that holds us. The same geometry that binds the pyramid binds us, atom to atom, breath to breath, life to life. We are no longer students of the ancient world. We are participants in its ongoing thought. The pyramid does not belong to history, it belongs to consciousness, and consciousness, once awakened, cannot return to sleep. Through this awakening, the idea of separation vanishes. The physical and the spiritual, the measurable and the mysterious, the human and the divine, these were never opposites, they were mirrors. We begin to sense that the Great Pyramid was not built to point upward but inward. Its apex is not a gesture toward heaven but toward the center of being, the still point within all motion, the infinite within the finite. And in that center, something ancient stirs. Perhaps this was the builder's true intention, not to defy time but to preserve a state of alignment, a harmony that outlives language. The pyramid is not eternal because it is made of stone. It is eternal because it was built in resonance with the laws that govern all things. Standing before it, the human mind begins to mirror its structure. Thoughts slow, breath steadies. The endless chatter of analysis falls silent. A calm, geometric stillness takes hold. We do not think the pyramid, we become it. In that stillness, a subtle shift occurs. A rising of awareness that feels less like discovery and more like remembrance. We are not learning something new. We are remembering something we have always known. We see it everywhere now, in the curve of a wave, the spiral of a storm, the orbit of moons, the unfolding of a fern. The same pattern, the same ratios, the same breath moving through matter. This is resurrection, the rebirth of sight, the awakening of the ancient within the modern, the recognition that consciousness and cosmos are one. The Great Pyramid becomes a mirror of the soul, and the soul a mirror of creation. The two reflect infinitely until they are indistinguishable. And in that reflection, there is peace. Not the peace of ignorance, but of understanding. A serenity born from the realization that the search is over, because the seeker and the sought were never apart. We thought we were studying a monument. We were studying ourselves. The resurrection is complete when the illusion of separateness dies. When we stop looking for meaning in the stars or in the stones and realize that meaning has always lived within us, in the quiet precision of the heart, in the symmetry of thought and feeling, in the pulse that matches the rhythm of the world. The pyramid endures not because it defies time, but because it is time, frozen in form, waiting for each generation to awaken to its reflection. And as this truth settles, a calm certainty replaces all questioning. There are no more arguments, no more doubts. The mystery remains, but it is no longer a void to be filled. It is a fullness to be felt. The Great Pyramid was never an answer. It was an awakening. And now, in the stillness of understanding, we feel what the builders must have felt as they placed the final stone. An immense, humbling recognition that to build something perfect is to touch the eternal. The pyramid stands, and so do we, reborn in its shadow, alive in its pattern, conscious of its truth. There is a point, after revelation, when words no longer suffice, where knowledge becomes presence and truth becomes silence. This is that moment. Everything we have uncovered, every number, every theory, every layer of wonder, now resolves into stillness. The pyramid, the earth, the light, the human heart, all are expressions of the same idea, a single continuous harmony woven through everything that exists. The ancients knew this, though perhaps not through calculation. They felt it, the same way a bird feels the wind before it rises, the same way the tide feels the pull of the moon. Knowledge without thought, geometry without proof, a knowing beyond the need to know. This is the elixir, the distilled essence of the entire journey. Everything vibrates, everything connects, everything remembers. The stones of the pyramid are not dead. They hum with the same frequency that moves through us. When we breathe, the air that leaves our lungs joins the wind that once swept over Khufu's laborers. The atoms in our blood were forged in the same stars whose light touched the pyramid the day it was completed. There is no boundary between past and present, between matter and mind. There is only continuity, the long, slow pulse of the universe reminding itself that it is whole. The Great Pyramid is proof of that wholeness, not through mystery, but through mathematics, not through myth, but through pattern. It stands as a reminder that creation is not chaos, it is composition, that the universe does not speak in words, but in ratios, intervals, vibrations, the silent language of resonance. And we who stand beneath its shadow are instruments in that same composition. Our thoughts, our emotions, our memories, all waveforms, all frequencies, all echoes of that original music. We spend our lives searching for meaning beyond ourselves, yet the meaning has always been within the pattern that gives us form. The ratio between inhalation and exhalation, the rhythm of heartbeat and silence, the balance between seeking and surrender, these are not metaphors for life, they are life. The pyramid teaches without speaking that harmony is not found, it is remembered. That perfection is not achieved, it is revealed when the noise of dissonance falls away. Every measurement, every discovery, every debate leads here to this single, breathtaking truth. We are part of the same equation. The ancients carved it into stone because they knew memory fades, but they also knew that the pattern endures, and that one day someone would see it again and remember. The elixir is not a secret to be guarded. It is a feeling to be lived. Everything is connected, not in metaphor but in mathematics. The same constants that bind the stars bind us. The same circle that defines the heavens defines the atom. The same number, pi, moves through every rotation, every orbit, every cycle of existence. It is the pulse of eternity. And when we realize that, something inside us quiets. The endless questions fall away. What remains is a kind of serenity, the realization that to exist at all is to participate in perfection. The Great Pyramid does not call us to worship it, it calls us to remember it, not as structure, but as symbol, not as riddle, but as reminder. The universe is not something we are in, it is something we are. Every cell, every photon, every heartbeat hums the same song that was written in stone 45 centuries ago. A song that says, "Nothing is lost, everything transforms." This is the elixir, the completion of the journey, the return of the circle to itself. The pyramid stands, as it always has, unchanging and eternal. But now we understand why. Because what it preserves is not stone. It preserves the pulse of creation. the unbroken rhythm between the measurable and the infinite. And in that rhythm we hear our own. We are not separate. We are not small. We are the geometry remembering itself. The wind moves again across the desert. It has always moved this way. But now the sound is different. The same air that once rushed past the stones of Giza carries with it a quiet hum, a resonance that was always there, though we had never truly listened. The sun drifts low along the horizon, spilling gold across the limestone blocks. The pyramid's shadow stretches, long, deliberate, silent. It traces an arc upon the sand, just as it has for 45 centuries. Yet to those who now understand, that shadow is no longer just a line of darkness. It is a circle half complete, a reminder that even what seems to end is only the beginning of a curve too vast to see. We have walked the circle ourselves. We began with measurement, with skepticism, with the safety of numbers. We sought to confine the mystery to equations, to fit infinity into definitions. But somewhere along the path, the numbers became symbols, the symbols became sound, and the sound became recognition. And now we return to where we began, but everything has changed. Once, the Great Pyramid was an artifact of wonder. Now, it is a mirror of being. The same geometry that once pointed outward, to the heavens, to gods, to imagined architects, now points inward, to the quiet intelligence behind our own eyes. We see that the builders never sought to defy time. They sought to speak to it. Their message is written not in hieroglyphs or prophecy, but in proportion. The pyramid endures because what it encodes cannot decay. Ratios do not erode. Harmony cannot crumble. The pattern simply shifts its form, from stone to mind to memory. We have become the new structure, the continuation of the equation. The pulse of the same design now beats in the chambers of thought and breath. And yet the echo is not only in us, it lives in everything that endures without reason. The spiral of a galaxy, the curling of smoke, the orbit of the moon, the slow expansion of light into the endless dark. Every motion, every rhythm, every repetition is the universe reminding itself that perfection was never something to reach. It was something to remember. Once, we built monuments to gods. Now we realize they were blueprints of ourselves. Every civilization, every age, has tried to build something that lasts. The Great Pyramid stands as proof that permanence is possible, but not through domination, not through power, through harmony, through alignment with the constants that underlie all existence. And so the echo becomes an invitation. It whispers across time, from the stones to our screens, from the desert to the mind. Remember what you are part of. We came seeking the secret of an ancient monument. We found the reflection of a timeless one, the geometry of consciousness itself. The pyramid's apex fades into the dusk. Its edges blur against the darkening sky until it seems less a structure than an idea, a perfect line between earth and eternity. The stars ignite above it, countless and cold, each one a repetition of the same equation: energy, pattern, light. And as the night deepens, the echo continues, soft, steady, endless. It is not a sound, it is a memory. The circle has closed, the pattern has spoken. And though the wind will erase our footprints from the sand, the resonance will remain. The pyramid endures, the pattern endures, and through them so do we. If this journey awakens something within you, listen to it. Because that quiet vibration you feel is not imagination, it is recognition. The same frequency that hums through the stars now hums in you, the same geometry that shaped the pyramid, the same ratio that carved galaxies from dust moves through the rhythm of your breath. You have carried it all along. The ancients did not build to be remembered. They built so that we might remember ourselves. The Great Pyramid stands as the last survivor of the ancient world, not because it conquered time, but because it harmonized with it. It was not built against nature, but with it. Every line aligns to the motion of the earth. Every angle whispers the relationship between shadow and light. The structure is not static, it is breathing with the planet, its ratios expanding and contracting with the slow heartbeat of tectonic drift. It endures because it belongs. And perhaps that is what the ancients knew, that nothing eternal can exist apart from what is whole. That to be part of the pattern is to never be forgotten. When you stand before the pyramid, you are standing before the echo of every civilization that has ever wondered why it exists. You are standing before a question disguised as a mountain, a silence that outlasts empires. And if you listen closely, you can hear what it has always been saying. Everything you seek is already within you, every number, every harmony, every answer. For the constant that binds circle to square, matter to light, heaven to earth, that constant also binds thought to being, dream to reality, you to everything. Pi was never just a number. It was a reminder that perfection can exist inside imperfection, that infinity can dwell inside the finite, that the eternal can be touched through the simplest of shapes. That is why the pyramid still stands. It does not tell us what to believe. It tells us how to look, patiently, reverently, with the humility of those who understand that knowledge is not owned but inherited. The ancients gave us a gift that outlasts empires and language, a geometry of remembrance, and the echo of that geometry reaches across centuries, calling to each of us in our own way. Some hear it in numbers, some feel it in music, some see it in art or symmetry or love. But all of us are responding to the same signal, the resonance of the infinite finding its reflection in the finite. So when you look at the night sky and you feel that pull, the one that seems to stretch from your chest to the stars, know that it is the same pull that lifted every stone of Giza, the same longing that turned curiosity into monument, that turned wonder into form. The Great Pyramid is not ancient. It is ongoing. It continues to build itself in every human who chooses to wonder instead of dismiss, who listens instead of explains, who measures not to conquer, but to understand. The resonance is still there. It passes through centuries like a heartbeat beneath the noise of history. We can ignore it, but we cannot silence it. It calls to us from the stones, from the stars, from the symmetry of our own hands. If you close your eyes, you can feel it, a slow, harmonic pulse beneath the noise of thought. That pulse is the same that binds the spiral of a galaxy to the spiral of a fingerprint. The same constant that defines the orbit of moons defines the rhythm of your heart. You are not separate from the design. You are the continuation of it. The pyramid has waited for thousands of years, not for worship, not for explanation, but for recognition, for someone somewhere to look not at its mystery, but at its mirror. Now we have. And in that act of seeing, the monument becomes complete, because a structure built to reflect consciousness requires consciousness to fulfill its purpose. Without awareness, it is only stone. With awareness, it is infinite. This is the resonance, the eternal feedback loop between the universe and itself, between form and observer, between pattern and perception. Every civilization leaves behind its message. Most fade. This one endures, not because it was the largest or the grandest, but because it spoke the universal tongue, the mathematics of being. The builders understood something we are only beginning to rediscover, that knowledge is not accumulation but alignment, that to live in harmony with the constants is to live in truth, that wisdom is not built through conquest but through calibration. The Great Pyramid is calibration, to the planet, to light, to consciousness itself. And though the centuries have eroded its casing stones and buried its capstone, the pattern remains, the message remains. Because the message was never in the surface, it was in the proportion. Every ratio within its walls is a reminder that what endures is not matter, but balance. We too are monuments of balance. We are the living expression of the same constants, the same pi that defines the curve of the horizon, the same phi that defines the structure of DNA. Every heartbeat is the echo of cosmic rhythm. Every thought is a reflection of the universe's own self-awareness. The pyramid reminds us, to live is to resonate, to love is to harmonize, to create is to remember. And so, as the last light of day slips behind the horizon and the stars ignite above the desert, we understand why this monument was built to outlast its age. It is not a relic, it is a teacher. A reminder that the pursuit of truth and the experience of wonder are the same path, carved in different directions. The ancients reached upward with stone. We reach outward with thought. Yet both gestures trace the same shape, the eternal triangle between self, cosmos, and the infinite. This is why the pyramid endures, because it is not only made of limestone and light, it is made of intention. It was built on faith, in proportion, in order, in the unspoken intelligence of the universe. And when we align ourselves to that same order, when our thoughts, our actions, our creations fall into harmony with what is real, we become part of that endurance. We become another stone in the unseen structure of understanding. This, perhaps, is what the builders hoped for, that one day, across millennia, their song of stone would find its echo in us, that we too would learn to listen. So listen, beneath the wind, beneath the silence, beneath the hum of existence itself, there is a rhythm. It is older than civilization, older than the stars, older than time. It is the rhythm of creation speaking to itself through countless forms, repeating endlessly in every particle of reality. If this journey has awakened that rhythm within you, do not let it fade. Carry it into every question you ask, every wonder you feel. Because the moment you do, the ancient geometry becomes alive again. The pattern continues, the circle closes, the pyramid still stands, but its true height can only be measured in consciousness. Its apex is not stone, it is realization. And through that realization, we rise with it. So if you feel that resonance now, hold it. Let it vibrate quietly within you. Let it remind you that you are part of something infinite, and that infinity for a moment has chosen to remember itself through you. Because this is not the end. It never was. It is only the next beginning. And as one frontier closes, another opens, beyond the desert, beyond the stars, beyond the limits of what we call the known. If you are ready, there are more frontiers ahead. It begins where it always ends, with silence. The desert at night is still, the air unmoving, the world holding its breath. Above, the stars burn cold and ancient, scattered across the sky like equations that refuse to fade. And beneath them, one shape endures, vast, silent, and precise. The Great Pyramid of Giza. For 4,500 years, it has kept its vigil over the sands, its corners aligned to the turning of the earth, its sides bathed by the same light that now touches your face. It has seen the birth of languages, the fall of empires, the long forgetting and rediscovering of wonder. It has waited for understanding not in time but in resonance, patient, eternal, unblinking. We began this journey with a question. How could such perfection exist so long before our mathematics, our telescopes, our machines? We end with another. How could it not? Because what we have discovered is that the builders were not ahead of their time. They were outside of it. They worked not from invention, but from remembrance. Their genius was not born from knowledge, but from listening. Listening to the same quiet order that hums through the universe, the same pulse that beats beneath all creation. We once thought the pyramid knew pi, but perhaps pi knew the pyramid. Perhaps it guided the hands of the builders the way the moon guides the tides, the way a melody guides the musician who has not yet learned to name the notes. The desert wind sighs through broken limestone and eroded casing stones, carrying the faint whisper of continuity. Empires may fall, languages vanish, civilizations turn to dust, but the pattern remains, the ratio remains, the circle remains. We used to think progress meant moving forward, away from mystery, But the pyramid reminds us that wisdom is a circle, not a line, that everything returns. We measure, we analyze, we debate, but in the end, the act of seeking draws us back to the same still point: awe. The pyramid has not changed since our first step in this journey. It is we who have been rebuilt, brick by brick, idea by idea, perception by perception. Now, as night deepens, the monument glows faintly under starlight. Each stone catches the pale silver of the cosmos, and for an instant, it looks less like architecture and more like memory, a memory of something the universe once dreamed and never forgot. The camera of thought pulls back. The pyramid shrinks, then the Earth, then the solar system. Ratios and orbits unfold in perfect proportion. The same constants appear at every scale, in the paths of electrons, in the arms of galaxies, in the breath between words. The same pattern, infinite and self-similar, unbroken since the first vibration rippled through the void. We realize now what the builders must have understood, that the universe is not an accident. It is architecture, a design that designs itself. The Great Pyramid was not meant to point to the sky. It was meant to remind us that we are the sky, that the same light passing through distant nebulae also passes through us. The same pi that defines its base defines the orbits of planets and the curvature of space. It was never a tomb. It was never a mystery. It was always a mirror. Look closely, and you will see yourself in its geometry, not your body, but your essence. You are built of proportion and balance, of rhythm and resonance. You are as much a monument to eternity as the stones that rise from the sand. And perhaps that was the message all along. The ancients did not build to leave behind proof of their greatness. They built to leave behind proof of ours, to remind us that every human being is capable of perceiving the infinite, of touching the eternal through attention, through harmony, through wonder. We once sought the builders in the past, in the dust and debris of forgotten dynasties. But the builders were never gone. They are here now, in everyone who searches, who questions, who dares to look beyond the surface of things. Every act of curiosity is a stone in that same pyramid. Every moment of understanding is another step upward toward the apex of consciousness. The Great Pyramid does not end at its summit. It extends beyond it, invisibly, infinitely, into the realm of thought. Its peak is unfinished because the structure was never meant to stop at stone. The rest of it is made of us. We are the capstone, the living completion of what was started 45 centuries ago. The circle closes when we understand that. When we see that the builder's vision was not limited to their own age, it was an offering to all ages, a way to bridge past and future through the constancy of form. It is said that when the last casing stone fell, the pyramid lost its gleam, that it no longer reflected the sun as it once did. But perhaps the light it once held was never meant to stay within it. Perhaps that light has simply moved into every eye that looks upon it, into every mind that dares to wonder why. And as you stand here in the long echo of its silence, you realize the light has not faded. It has multiplied. The pattern lives on, not in equations, not in theories, but in consciousness. Everything connects, everything vibrates, everything remembers. The pyramid is still remembering. So are you. Its shadow moves again, tracing a perfect arc across the desert, the same curve as before, yet now filled with meaning. The journey ends as it began, with sunlight and shadow, geometry and grace. The circle completes itself. But completion is not closure. The circle turns endlessly, and each revolution carries us deeper into understanding. The pyramid will outlive us, as it has outlived every civilization before ours. But it will not outlive the pattern, because it is the pattern. It will continue to hum through the atoms of the earth, through the fabric of space, through the pulse of human thought. And if we have learned anything from it, it is that immortality does not belong to stone. It belongs to proportion, to balance, to harmony, to awareness. The ancients carved their memory into the planet so that when we, the distant inheritors of their dream, finally awoke to ourselves, we would remember what they already knew, that the universe is not a place, it is a relationship, that everything that exists is bound by the same law, the law of connection. We are not visitors in this cosmos, we are participants in its unfolding. Each breath, each thought, each moment of awe continues the equation, extends the geometry, keeps the pattern alive. This is the circle.
This is the frontier.
And as one mystery resolves, another begins. For beyond the pyramid, beyond the known, beyond even the limits of imagination, the same ratios stretch on, through atoms, through light, through consciousness itself. The pattern is endless, the frontier eternal, and the voice of the universe, still whispering through the geometry of creation, asks the only question that truly matters. Now that you remember, what will you build? Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe here on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.